Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I am your host, Dr. Harbir Sayan. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me, guys. As always, super grateful. Always appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to join me here and my amazing guest so we can all learn and grow. Off the top, real quick, as always, I have a quick favor. If you could, please leave a review, share this with a friend, send a screenshot, post a screenshot on Instagram, or send a link to your friend via Instagram, text message, LinkedIn, wherever. And don't forget, for some reason, all of our reviews got erased a little while ago. We're starting to climb back up thanks to the support of our amazing listeners. But if you wouldn't mind, please do leave a review and leave a little comment as well. That always helps us to get this out there and share it with more of our colleagues, because the information we're going to share today is so valuable. I want to make sure as many people hear it as possible. My amazing guest today is Mr. Ankit Patel, who is the founder of My Business Care Team and the co-owner of Classic Vision, which is a multi-location optometry practice in the Atlanta, Georgia area. Ankit is a business owner, business manager, and he works with his wife, Mithil Patel, who is the optometrist, one of the optometrists within the practices. So thank you so much, Ankit, for joining me here. I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Ankit, every time I've spoken to you a couple of times now, and I get this real feel of you're a really great business mind, and I'm trying to soak up as much information as I can when you're talking. But we were just speaking right before we started recording. I was like, what's the kind of the core theme of this? I was like, business development. I want some really good business advice. And you used a term that I would not have come up by myself, which is, we're going to discuss leverage points for business owners in eye care. Meaning, what are the points, the places in your business that you can make the biggest change with the smallest amount of effort, right? And I like that you also gave me the antonym, the opposite of that, which is, it's the opposite of sitting there spinning your wheels like you're on a hamster wheel or you're on a treadmill, you're not going anywhere. And I like that idea, because a lot of times I feel that way. I feel like I'm putting in all this effort and I'm not seeing results where I think I should. And it could be because I'm not identifying the leverage points. So I'm really excited to bring this up. And there's a lot, I made notes here. Like we talked about, we could go on for hours. So we're going to try to condense this. And, I'm going to let you run with it for the most part, but I think we want to create some definitions for people. What size of practice are you in? Where are you right now in your practice? And so identify leverage points based on where you are. But let's start by maybe talking about your company a little bit first, and then we'll see where that falls into some of the leverage points that people can identify. My Business Care Team is a BPO, which is, oh my goodness, I had just looked it up. You're going to have to remind me.
Business process outsourcing.
Yeah. Business process outsourcing, which maybe in some ways compared to having a virtual assistant, but it's much more than that. So let's define that, please, and let's talk about My Business Care Team.
Sure. So My Business Care Team, really quick, is a BPO for optometrists and ophthalmology practices. The main difference between a VA and a BPO is a BPO is in charge of the actual process, metrics, accountability, HR, all those functions. If you have a VA, you're basically getting a body. With the BPO, you're getting a service. And then the BPO just figures out how much staff you need, how to manage the staff, how to figure out coverage, vacation time, all that. That's taken care of. So that's the biggest difference. BPO is sort of like, hey, just do this for me. VA is like, well, I just need a body and I can figure it out myself with them.
That's a pretty big difference. That sounds to me like the difference between having a technician versus having an office manager. Office manager understands the business processes and understands what needs to be done. And the BPO sounds like it's able to take care of a lot of stuff for the business.
That's actually a pretty good analogy. Yeah. That's actually pretty close. Right. Yeah. Because you give your office manager, go figure this out, right? Versus saying, I have a tech and I have to train him, I have to teach him everything.
Right. Yeah. Good. All right. So Ankit, you have run the practices yourself, Classic Vision Care. You told me you were managing those practices. So you really have a lot of hands-on experience in the trenches, in the clinics. And one of the things I wanted to define right off the top was, when we're talking here, there are people out there who are listening who have a single doctor practice, single location, single doctor practice, and they may be making whatever their revenue is. And then somebody might be listening who has a multi-location, multi-doctor practice, which is a totally different ballgame. So I would like to first define that, so we kind of understand some of the numbers, and then when we're talking about leverage points, people in different positions can recognize which ones are valuable to them. So if you don't mind, I'm going to let you run with that.
Yeah. So what I tell folks is, what is the goal, right? Start with that. So a person who is, $1 million practice, two people might have completely different goals. One person might just want a lifestyle. They might
Sure.
want to take Fridays off and just not work a lot. Another person is like, I want to triple the size of this business and grow and expand, right? So
Right.
start with that first, because your leverage points are going to determine what direction you want to go. And so, we'll just pick one of those. I think we'll just pick the one that says, for example's sake, the person who wants to, not work every Friday, right? They don't want to, they're the sole practitioner in their practice. They're doing, let's say, 750 to 800,000 US dollars, 100,000 US dollars a year. And they're like, okay, well, how do I take a day off? Right. And so what do I look at from that perspective? So, so let me back up a step. So typically I would categorize it. If you want to categorize it, it's best. I mean, you can do it by revenue. There's different ways to categorize different growth stages, but you've basically got your first startup stage, which is roughly 0 to 3 to 500,000 US dollars a year in revenue. Then you have your second stage, which is anywhere from 500 to 2 million, depending on where you are and how much you can do off of like one provider. And then you have
Right.
more complex setups with multi-provider, multi-doctor, and somewhere in that range. So the complexity really determines where your main leverage points are.
Right.
But no matter where you are on that journey, start off with your goal, and then you can look at three different things in your business. The first thing is, how do you get patients in the door? The second thing is, how do you service the patients, the operations in the four walls, and maybe even a little bit outside that four walls, and then how do you get paid on that, which is really important for a lot of U.S. based optometrists. Canada is a little different with the
Mm-hmm.
insurance system,
Mm-hmm.
but there is still some of that as well, and understanding how it affects money flow. And so I can, and stop me anytime if you have any questions. But yeah,
No, yeah, that's good right now. I just remember you gave me a quote: "Get the work, do the work, and get paid for the work." Right? That's essentially what you're saying here. Get people in the door, do the exams, do the service, and then make sure you get paid for it at the end. That's an
yeah,
important little phrase to remember.
yeah. And so I'll give you, no matter where you are on your journey, you can assess this, right? So if you're wanting to grow the business, you got to figure out, am I getting enough work in? And the thing
Right.
is it consistent? Do I have a predictable system that allows me to know how many people are coming in? So, for instance, for most ODs, if they've been in practice for several years, I'm going to recall. I'm going to pre-appointment the patients. I know, let's say 30 to 50%, 70% of my patients come back next year. So I can know if I have 100 patients this year, 70 of those patients are going to come back next year in the same month. So I've got to fill the other 30 up somehow. Or
Mm-hmm.
if I want to grow, how do I grow that? So how am I getting new patients? So what am I doing? And there's strategies around what you can do around that. We can talk about what kind of works and what doesn't in the industry. There's the doing the work, right? Do I have enough staff? Am I paying them the right amount? Do I have enough work so I don't lose people? And I can do that effectively. And most people will focus there the most, because that's where they can touch and feel the most day in and day out, especially doctors who are in the business. And then getting paid on the work is something that doesn't get thought about other than just billing and filing. But keep in mind, if you're doing the work now and you're selling them glasses, but you're not getting paid on those glasses by your managed care providers until 15, 30, 60 days out, that's what's called the cash conversion cycle. You're basically the bank for both. You're basically acting like a bank for the insurance companies in that case.
Right.
So you're financing them because you've already paid for the
Interesting.
products before they give you your money back. And
Mm.
so those are things that you want to look out for. And then you don't always get the money back right away. You have to file for reimbursements, and you got to fight for your reimbursements. And I know Canada is different. I think it's a little easier there, but the
Yeah.
similar principle applies. If you're sending a majority of your billing out to the Canadian medical system, it's gonna be a lag before you get it back, and you've already spent it on labor, your utilities, all that's already been spent up front, glasses, whatever it might be, all your costs are up front. And so the more you can get paid when you do the work, the better. So if you can figure out a way to shift that's important.
Yeah, that still applies in a lot of cases here. Like, for example, BC, I'll use, if we do bill something to the medical system, it's at least 2 weeks, right? It may be a bit more, because we submit it on a certain day, and then it's a couple weeks out from then when you get it back. So it's at least 2 weeks. And then if there's something going to an insurance company, a third-party insurance company, again, you're looking at probably a couple of weeks out before you get something back. So that lag still exists. You get the odd patient who just says, here, put it on my credit card, and we're like, yes, please. But that doesn't happen as often as we'd like, obviously. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, I think, is that lag, and then the difference in the cash flow there, whereas like you're not collecting that money right away for the sales that you're making. So what are some of that now moving forward then? Let's say you have that practitioner who's looking to kind of take those Fridays off, right? That kind of scenario that you brought up. What are some things that person needs to start looking for?
So first, where are you now? So we can talk about a couple different scenarios. Let's start off with the doctor who's still in the startup mode. So let's say they're $300,000 in revenue, US dollars a year. They're like, I'm working 5 days a week, maybe 6 days, even if they're working Saturdays. And they just started, and they're not maybe a year into their practice, maybe 2, maybe more. And they're like, okay, well, I really want to work less. How do I do this? So there's a couple different ways to set that up, and it depends on the strategy they want to use. One strategy is to just say, we're just going to close the office, right? Another strategy is I'm going to bring in another doctor that can fill the work. And so either strategy, the math has to work out. So you can do a quick calculation. How much does a doctor cost me a day? And will that doctor, what are they going to produce? Are they going to produce as much as I can? So what do I currently produce on a revenue per patient basis? And for a rule of thumb, I say count 80% for budgeting purposes. They're going to produce 80% of what you produce. And that's not always true, but from a budgeting standpoint, that'll give you a good gauge of where the break-even point might be. It's like, okay, if they produce 80% of what I produce, I have to pay them. Does it make sense for me to bring them in and do all this? And I also have to have, my staff and everything. So if my normal day is, I'm just going to make up a number like $1,000 in receivables, right? Total, all in. Well, if they're going to produce $800 in receivables, it's probably going to cost me more to keep the doors open that day than it is to have them there. But if my average receivables are $3,000, then that makes more sense for me, because my average cost to keep the doors open with the doctor is going to be less. And so you have to figure out, well, is that my problem? So we talk about leverage points. Do I have enough volume? Do I have enough patients? So you can look at it from different perspectives. So one leverage point is my average per patient is $200 per patient, and I need more patients in the door because I only have 4 a day on average, right? So I'm making $800 in revenue. And again, I'm just making up numbers. Now, if I can either raise my average per person, so I don't have to see more patients, or I can get more in the door, or I can do both.
Right.
Getting more in the door requires effort, marketing, and there's different leverage points there. So in our industry, the best way that I've seen marketing work for us and other folks is boots on the ground. Getting out there, speaking in community, being a part of we have a 5K. Oh, we have a tent set up to be there. Handing out flyers. Oh, here's a sample. Well, at least in the U.S., here's a sample of some over the counter dry eye drops if you want to try them out if you're a runner, which we've done before, and collect information, market to them, and have that whole setup. And from average per patient, it's also assessing, what are we selling, right? Is it the right product mix for the office, for our customer base, our patient base? Is it, do we just make a decision that we're not going to be everything to everyone? Are we just going to be a high-end practice? And those are decisions that you'll have to make as an owner of what you want to do and what you don't want to do. But those are some leverage points if you're in that zone to figure out, okay, once you get your average per patient, your revenue up, then you can make a decision. Do I want to keep the office open, or do we have such a demand that I can reduce the number of days and not open at all? Or, my staff is there to deal with walk-ins because we have a good visible location. So I want to keep the doors open, but I don't want to be there. That's an option as well. So it just depends, and everyone is different. So it's hard to give a prescription, right? But those are some things to look at.
Yeah, that's a great few points to consider at the very least, right? Because sometimes, I've had this conversation with colleagues, and they're like, do I bring on an associate? Do I just not, do I just close that day? And everybody struggle. A lot of people struggle with that, myself included. We go through these different phases with our practice, so we're kind of deciding which ones to go. But it's at least good to know what to think about, right? At least if you know what to think about, then you can make a more, at the very least, more educated decision on what you're going to do, and you feel a little more comfortable. You feel less kind of lost when you make that decision. I want to go back to something you said about bringing more people in the door and the marketing side of things. A lot of times we these days we talk a lot about like digital. I talk a lot about digital marketing, right? Whether it's Google ads or social media and stuff like that, and trying to bring people in. And those things, they work, but they do require a level of experience and expertise and an investment money wise that maybe more today than maybe it did a few years back, right? That it's becoming more competitive. Yet going like this traditional boots on the ground stuff that we've been doing for generations or decades, that stuff still works like the same way. It just requires effort, right? I think we're always looking for sort of an easy way to get things done. And I remember you saying something about that, about the more effort it requires for you to bring a person in. If you don't mind, if you remember what you're saying there, sharing that with me again. It was like the more effort, the less effort it requires to bring someone in, the less loyal they're going to be, or something like that. Do you remember saying that?
Yeah. So at least that's what I've noticed in our business, right?
Yeah.
So like the online people, reducing the friction, getting them in, it tends to be more transactional, right? So people who value that speed, they want to come in, they don't really value you as a provider.
Yeah.
They just want something transactional. Now, if you're a transactional type place, then great. That's actually a perfect place to focus. Most private practice is very hard to compete in that space because most transactional folks are low cost folks too. So they're going to continue to put the price down. So they're like Zenny optical buyers, those type of folks that really want, really, we call them value buyers, really just inexpensive, the bare minimum type stuff. Not always, but that tends to be the overlap that we see in our office.
Yeah.
And so you're right. And what, you mentioned the online ad spend. One thing I'll give people is you want what's called ROAS, return on ad spend. So if you are going to do that, you want to look for a 5x return on ad spend. So it's like you can set up, it's called a funnel, right? A marketing funnel. You get so many impressions on your ad. You get so many people to click. So many people click, contact you, and so many of those turn into appointments that actually pay money.
Right.
That bottom number has to be however much money they pay you should be 5 times more than the top number. So first step would be to figure out what's your average per patient. So let's just make up a number, say it's $200. Your average per patient is $200. And so US dollars. And so I'm just going to use US dollars in everything I say.
That's perfectly fine.
I keep saying that. So,
so
$200 is your average per patient. Well, I know one click, let's say we do the funnel, they show me the information. It's like, oh, you know what? We're getting like 12 clicks, 10 clicks a day on this. Great. Out of those 10 clicks, I'm getting 2 appointments. So, but each click is costing me $4. So I'm spending $40 a day, but I'm getting 2 appointments. So for $40, I'm getting $400 in revenue. So that's a 10x ROAS, return on ad spend. So for me, that's actually a great deal. Now yours won't be that good. It'll be closer to the 5x. Most people will have close to a 5x because that's really what the markets are kind of evening out to be, because clicks are getting expensive.
Yes, we're seeing that. Certainly, I think from what I remember most recently when we were talking to our marketing ad people, we were in the $35 range, which I thought sounded pretty reasonable as far as the cost per click. And that's bringing in 1 or 2 patients. One, I think. Yeah, it was somewhere in the 5x kind of range that what you're talking about, or maybe a little higher than that. So we were pretty happy with where it was sitting. But I've only recently started to kind of learn a bit more about those numbers and understand the value of them. And you're right. And of course, the more of a more kind of a metropolitan area you're in, you're going to get more competition in that space. And certainly we're seeing that as well. There's a lot of competition for certain words, keywords, and things like that. So you got to get creative as well to find people to bring them in.
Yeah, you're right. The where no one wants to be, it's the easiest to set up shop because people, they have no other choice, right? It's like, okay, you're it. I was talking to someone who we're potentially working with, who's in a rural area out in the Southwest area. They have a couple of locations, and it was like very much like it's just crazy easy to build a base there because there's not many people there within hours of their locations. They have multiple locations that are pretty far away, but it's pretty. They've built a pretty impressive practice out there. But
man, there's one thing I just don't think I ever still would do it. I'm like, if I were to start all over again, I would try to go out a couple hours away from where I am at least. But then I think, but how realistic is that? I'm so glued to where I live. It's so unlikely that I would move. And that's the benefit for people who are willing to move out to less developed areas or more rural areas. It's going to be beneficial, I think. Those practices tend to be a little bigger and do fairly well.
Yeah. And there's nothing, quality of life is different, obviously. And if you're in the city, there's nothing, you just have to be more mindful and more strategic about where you play and what you play in. So you may want to consider, if you have a lot of competition, specializing in something so you can go deeper into the market with that and not be everything to everyone. Because if there's a lot of people, then there's a lot of people trying to be everything to everyone. So there's a lot of strategy that plays into that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk a bit about staff and the team and everything in the business and how you kind of look at bringing people on and hiring the right people and so on. I think we talked a little bit about this. One of the books I think you and I have read that we both like is Good to Great. Jim Collins, I think, is one of the best business books ever written, or at least one of the most biggest selling ones. And Jim Collins, one of the biggest ideas that's been taken out of that book is that get the right people on the bus, right? And so I wonder if you don't mind kind of sharing that. Let's say again, you're a single doctor practice, you're trying to hire people, trying to bring on a business manager. What types of things should I be looking for there, when I'm hiring, or what processes should I have in place so I bring on the right people and I get them in the right seats?
Yeah. So there's actually a good way to analyze people to do that. Excuse me. If you look up, it's called People Analyzer from Traction. It tells you how to do it. It tells you if it's the right bus for them and if they're in the right seat in the right bus. So how do you know that it's the right bus? Well, how do they compare to your values that you have as an organization? If you don't have values, explicit values, you have implicit values, because there's always something that's there, right?
Always values, right?
And then is it the right seat on the bus? Can they do the job? Do they want to do the job? And do they have the capacity in all aspects to do the job? Whether it's, showing up to work on time, or whether it's like, do I have a degree that I can do that? So those are types of things. From hiring standpoint, the best way to hire is past success determines future success. And it's not exactly in that statistically is pretty accurate for it's a very high percentage of people that it's accurate for. So behavior-based questions are the best questions to ask. So when you go in, this is what we do. So I'll give you an example. We hired our GM at our practice. I interviewed several candidates, and we do all the testing and everything, but the behavior-based questions told me a lot. So I knew in this position that whoever was coming on board would have to be able to create systems and processes on their own and learn the industry on their own, because I wasn't going to hold their hand through the process.
Right.
And so if they didn't already have the experience, they would have to take the material that we have and say, go figure it out. And so when I interviewed folks, I interviewed someone with experience in the industry. And, our offices are a little bit, everyone's a little different. So we do things a little differently. We have different processes, some unique things. And so they would have to, whoever's coming in would have to learn those, even if they were, if they knew the industry. So example is how we do our handoffs in the chair and how we train to that, our playbooks that we have, those type of things, right? There's some new terminology and things that people in the industry aren't necessarily used to. And so I interviewed this person and I asked them, hey, when was the last time you learned something new? And when I started asking the questions, it turns out they had learned a new procedure. I forgot what the procedure was. I think it was like an IPL or something like that. Okay. But they learned how to do it. But I was like, okay, well, who initiated that learning? It was like, well, my boss wanted me to learn it. I was like, okay, well, how'd you learn it? Well, they just showed me how to do it. Did you did you learn anything on your own? Like, no, they just showed me and that was it. Okay, cool. This person also had a dance studio because she seemed very entrepreneurial. So I was like, okay, let me talk to you a little bit here. So how'd you start the dance studio? Well, I really like dance, and there's this one particular type of dance I really wanted to, and I started a studio doing this. So, and I asked her, well, how'd you get down that path? Well, this person had this course. I learned it from them, and then I got out there and I opened the class up because it's part of their program. I was like, okay, well, what did you have to learn on your own? And there was nothing there, right? So there's a consistent pattern of never creating their own systems and processes, and a consistent pattern of not learning on their own, even though on paper she was like a perfect fit. But when I asked those questions, she didn't have that requisite experience. So I was setting her up for failure if I had hired her in this position. Now, the other person I did end up hiring had no experience in the industry, but had several years of experience in several places of creating systems and processes for multi-site locations and training and developing people from scratch without having something already developed. And so he's been actually fantastic that we've been in our offices. So
That's interesting.
yeah.
So looking for somebody who has experience, so especially in that managerial type of role, right? If you got to look, oversee other people, you got to make sure people are, you're looking for somebody who has taken initiative to develop systems or processes before, even if it's sort of inadvertently or without really knowing what they're doing, but they did that.
Ideally, they know what they're doing, especially the manager.
Well, but
yes,
fair enough. But I mean, they have the capacity to go find the information to go do something, right? Like,
versus to demonstrate the capacity, right? And it doesn't always have to be work related. It can be, and I ask outside of work related questions because not everyone has that opportunity. But if you have someone who has demonstrated that they've done that, then they can probably do it at your place because they've done it before.
Sure.
And opticians are interesting too. If you're hiring an optician, depending on how you practice, but one of the things you want to look for are humility and ability to learn for opticians, because you want curiosity, because you want them to understand the patient and the patient needs so they can get in the right products. And also like, I wonder why the person really needed sunglasses, but they didn't, like, why didn't they get it from us? Why is that? And they ask the question. So you're looking for that trait of curiosity, and when they've had that sense of curiosity and how to learn and do that. And so those are questions we ask our opticians in terms of how they learn and are they curious.
Interesting. So curiosity and humility are two important traits for the opticians, or that's people on the floor who are selling, or people who are like, or other different areas within the business as well?
Those are the ones that are selling. We cross-train too. So typically everyone has a sense of curiosity because there's a lot of questions that the techs will ask, and we want them to dig deep and really understand the patient's needs. And sometimes you have to read between the lines. So we like to have that curiosity. So that's a trait that we look for. And it's actually one of our core values. It's curiosity.
Oh, curiosity, core value. I like that. Very good. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. Our core values are care. It's curiosity, always on stage, relentless, and elevate.
Always on stage. Tell me about that one.
That is, you're leading the patient and you have a great stage presence. So, so if you ask a question like, do you want this? Or what, that is not leading the patient. It's like, do you prefer this or this? That is an example of leading. And there's having a stage presence is, hey, if you're having a bad day, everyone gets bad days. If you need time away from patients and make sure to take care of it, we can help you and support you. But if you're in the office, like, we don't gossip about patients, don't talk bad about folks. It's like, try to have a positive experience. That's always on stage, right? Like, how do you make sure that experience, and because the people only see us once a year, most of the time. And so, you know, if you're having a bad day, they have a bad experience, well, you're not going to get another chance for another year with that patient.
If you're lucky. Interesting points. I really like that. And, you know, going back to the office manager or the GM position, looking for somebody who has that trait or the history of being able to develop processes for themselves or train other people, not simply rote memorization or read something and do what's said. That's an interesting thing. Now, we definitely haven't looked for that specifically, but I look at that and I look at our manager in one of our offices, and we really appreciate how, you know, amazing she is, knock on wood. You know, she's been fantastic and is a really good leader and has developed a good culture in the office just because of clearly natural abilities, because before she worked for us, she had not really had other jobs where she would have necessarily developed those skills, but we didn't necessarily pick those traits up in her when we hired her, because we hired her more as like a technician, optometric assistant. But as we saw those traits in her, we kept elevating her, bringing her up, and now she runs the whole show. So I'm going to give myself a little credit for seeing that in her, but after we hired her, not when we hired her. So I just want to kind of put that out there, right? You might have somebody on your team already who has those traits. And it's a good thing to kind of look for that ability for somebody to take the lead and take the initiative and maybe elevate them, bring them up within the ranks.
And I'll emphasize this again. It depends on where you currently are and where you want to go. So if you have bandwidth to train, someone has raw talent, like let's say you have someone who's relatively new out of school, they started all these nonprofits, these organizations, they're active in like local community organizations. Yeah. They're clearly a leader, right? In what they've done, they don't have a lot of work experience.
Right.
So they're going to be pretty raw at work. So if you have the bandwidth and you're able to do that and you're able to train them, they may be a great candidate to move up. But if you don't have the capacity or bandwidth to do that, and you don't have enough staff, then you're setting that person up for failure. If you're saying, go figure it out. Right. And so, you still have to keep that in mind as well. So understanding your current situation, you guys sound like you were in a good position to give her that authority, and she had enough requisite skill set to be able to complete that. But not everyone, it's not always a good match, right? A lot of times it's about fit and timing.
Right. Absolutely. So bringing the right person on the bus was looking at that, looking for that certain experience and path, the history of where that person coming. What about getting them in the right seat? Is there certain things that we need to look for there differently?
Yeah, and Traction is the book I highly recommend people read to implement this, operationalize it. It's called Traction by Gino Wickman. And yes, there's a clear protocol. They call it get it, want it, capacity.
Get it, want it, capacity.
And those are yes, no to each one of those three. So get it is, what are the metrics? What are the three to five deliverables for that job? So optician is, hey, you have to be able to sell glasses at a certain percentage rate. You've got to be able to do inventory. You've got to be able to also tech, whatever it might be in your office. And then you have to be able to, follow up and manage jobs and things like that, right? Let's just say that's your role. Well, get it is you can say, yes, you're hitting all those objectives right now. So that's yes. Want it. Hey, do you really want the job? Are you really trying to do stuff? Are you learning? You're being proactive? Yes. Capacity. Hey, you're here on time. You're able to work all the hours that we have. You clearly have the skills to do this job because you're selling at a high level. And the areas where you're weak, you're actually showing desire to learn because you want it. And so that the capacity may be a little short in some areas, but you're getting there. And I would say, yes, you have the capacity to do this job. And so if it's a yes to all three, then that person is in the right seat. Now, if those all are good, but they're awful to work with, like if they're not always on stage, if they're the jerk, right, then they're not on the right bus, the right seat, but not the right bus.
Right. So the core values really determine, are you on the right bus?
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of the North Star when you're hiring someone, or a lot of the decisions you're making in the business. Again, Traction was something that I wanted to kind of talk about anyways, and you brought it up a couple of times. I wish I had the copy here. It's in my bag, I think. But I've been going through it slowly, very slowly, but I'm going through it. And I wondered if you could share, I know it's a process, but if you could share kind of a couple of quick highlights on how you developed your core values, because I think that's something, again, that is a bit of a mystery for a lot of people, right? I'll say, we'll talk about importance of developing core values, but then everybody's like, how do I pick curiosity or always on stage or something like that? How do you come to that conclusion?
The AI is useful for this. Ask ChatGPT. Just put in, this is what I value. What are these core values? And you can use it as a partner to kind of talk back and forth.
Great.
And it's actually pretty good. So that's actually a really good use case of AI. The other things are just ask your team, like, what do you think we value here? What do I really value here? And then what do I value in my life? Ask other people what they see and what feels right to you. And there's no one way to do it. The way we did it was we started off, we revamped it. We rewrote it like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
One of the values was really around giving, like originally it was like, give a damn. Like I give a damn about being here. Right. Like I want to care. Right. And that's elevated, that changed to elevate over time because it was a little bit, when we wordsmith it a little bit, and really what we're trying to get here. Well, we're trying to make it a fantastic experience. And so between relentless and elevate, that's kind of indicating you give a damn, right? You want to be here because you're trying really hard and you're producing, you're trying to get things better. And so it's really, you don't have to get it right the first time. Just get the airplane in the air and then you can course correct later on. So if you have something, it's at least a starting point to learn from. So put something down and say, does everyone have these values? The People Analyzer tool, the way they say to analyze it is to say, give everyone a plus, minus, or minus on each one of the values. And plus is you live the value 80% or more of the time. Plus minus is 60 to 80%, and minus is less than 60%.
Okay.
And there's a bare minimum, right? And it depends on where your minimum is. Ours are, you have to have 3 pluses and only 1 plus minus as the bare minimum to be on the bus.
Out of those 4 core values.
Yeah.
Got it.
And if you're not, we give you coaching opportunities. Like, hey, you're kind of missing this. Can we get this a little bit better? And we're going to check back in a month to make sure you're there. And so that kind of helps keep people understanding what the expectations are on the bus.
That's very good. And that sounds, from what I've read so far in Traction, sounds like you guys are pretty close to what's described in that book as far as checking in, and like if somebody's not living up to those expectations, give them 30 days. If it's still not working, then it's probably time to make a decision, right? On one way or the other. Very good. I like that. That's awesome. So you have the CARE. That's, oh my gosh, curiosity, always on stage, relentlessness, and elevate. Cool. But, and I think sometimes we get stuck on like, oh, I want to pick a word that like, says everything about us, but like you can have multiple, right? And just make sure that they work. And
it doesn't have to be an acronym. I mean, but again, use ChatGPT and it'll create acronyms for you. You can use, it's great for this. This is a great use case for this. Yeah.
There you go. That's one actually I hadn't thought of. I like that. Okay. So use ChatGPT for all the other things that you might be using it for, but use it to also maybe come up with your core values, or at least help you narrow them down.
Use it as a thought partner, saying, hey, I'm trying to come up with my core values. Here's what I value a lot. Help me kind of give me some ideas what my core values might be. And then once you come up with them, give me an acronym that spells a word that's 4 or 5 acronyms with these values, and they come up with stuff. Yeah. So
love it. Okay. You know what? That's a perfect segue, because one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was how you're using AI in your business, or how you might see others, or like optometrists perhaps using AI in their business right now. I know there's perhaps limited use cases right now, but what do you see, or what do you see it going potentially in a way that could support a business owner?
So the one thing you can do right now is difficult conversations with your staff, your whoever, right? Staff, vendors, patients. Put it in ChatGPT, and it'll give you a way to kind of handle that response. So, hey, just put in there, hey, I'm having a challenging time with a direct report. This is the brief situation. What are some ways to go and handle this? And it'll give you some ideas. And what's a good way to approach this to where I feel like I can get my point across, but not be overbearing or micromanaging, whatever it might be, right? Whatever you want to put in there. Right. That's actually a great use case that a lot of people are using it for right now, and it's very effective.
Interesting. Okay.
Another use case is workforce automation, or workflow automation, not workforce automation. We're using it a lot in our hiring process to vet candidates and do a first round interview right off the bat. So we have a list of questions that we like to ask based off the position. They type out the answer, and then we actually use ChatGPT and a couple of other tools to automatically score their responses, and we take the best candidates and interview them. I'm also a separate thing, developing out a tool that basically you can upload a resume, and it'll prioritize and give you a first interview for questions for that candidate based off your job and your company information.
Wow. Yeah. And that's something that you are actually developing as a tool. So you're taking existing AI, whatever software that's available, and you're tailoring it for that.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
For lack of better words. Can you go back? What's that?
So that's a pretty good description, actually. Yeah, we're just basically using AI as a back-end engine to kind of do the analysis.
Got it. Well, that's great. That's really cool. And is that something that you're just going to use within your own business, or you might, what's the right word? Sell it or something for other people?
We'll probably offer it to our partners who are using us, and then we'll probably have it as a separate line of business too for folks. And that's not necessarily optometry specific. It's just something that we've had to build internally just to get through a lot of candidates that we interview. Yeah. And so it's something that other people could find benefit from it as well.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Very cool. What else? Is there anything else that you're seeing right now as far as optometry related or eye care related where you might see AI valuable?
So, and this kind of ties in a little bit with why we started my business care team, is the cost of staff. So the touch points are getting more, right? And I don't know about in Canada, but I know in the US, there's a lot of touch points, especially if you're medical or Medicaid or one of these managed care provider heavy practices. There's a lot of extra touch points for shrinking margins because they're not reimbursing higher, but the cost for staff, utilities, overhead is going up. And so making sure we're managing that. So there's certain ratios that we like to maintain. One of the ratios is non-doctor payroll, and try to keep it 24% or less is the target. Okay. And so we've been able to do that primarily because we've taken a lot of the back office, phone answering, a lot of the stuff out of the office to our remote team. Right. And so that's been helpful a lot. And that 24 in our 24% number, we include all of our benefits. So we offer healthcare, 401k, time off, all that's in there as well.
Wow.
So if you don't offer that, it might be lower.
Yeah, but that seems like you guys are doing a good job. That's pretty efficient. So why don't we lead towards wrapping up here? Because I think again that's a nice little segue. Let's talk a little bit more about my business care team. Where does a BPO perhaps come in and become valuable for a practice owner? You know, what type of a setting would that be a leverage point?
So there's a couple of different places. The best place that is the most effective, like, hey, quickest win, is you're overwhelmed with phone calls and you don't have enough. You're not getting to all of them, right? Your calls are going missed. You're missing opportunities. Your staff is getting distracted. You don't have enough staff to support the team. And so that's ultimately what if you're in that situation, then yes, it would work out great to have someone like a BPO come in and augment what you're doing. And over time, as we learn the business, we actually offer more and more value to the organization. So someone who, let's say you're short staffed right now, you can't find folks. You need one or two more people. That's a great fit for someone like us to come in to say, let us help answer your phones, alleviate some of that, take care of some of the things like confirmation appointments, pulling insurances and benefits, making sure that's accurate, uploading it to your system so you have all that information. So it takes that burden off your team. That way you either use us until you find someone if you want to go back to that, or just keep us and then just say, okay, well, we just need fewer staff so I can pay my staff in-house better, which is what we did. Right. So we actually end up paying quite a bit more than market pay for most positions. And we also offer all these benefits, right? Healthcare, time off, 401k match. And by doing that, we're able to get better quality, more productive folks. The one thing I don't think most people realize is that you can pay 20% more than market and you'll get someone who's way more productive than 20% better than the next person. You'll get like 10x performance, not just incremental performance better. So that's something to consider too. The better you can manage your costs and the right people in the right spots. Again, the leverage points. For us, that was a leverage point to be able to get really good talented people that get us 10x more than someone who was cost about maybe 20% less.
That's an interesting point. So because you were able to outsource a lot of those tasks, you were able to then focus on the hiring better staff, pay them a little more, but get a lot better results out of that, which makes sense. When you don't have to do a lot of the mundane sort of monotonous stuff, it allows you to kind of be more creative and frees you up to do more kind of productive things.
Well, it also takes away the well, I had all these other things to do. I was like, well, no, your part of EOS is accountability. Your accountability is this. Did you do these things that you're accountable to? And that's the other thing. That's the other side of this coin, that it may be difficult for some doctors because doctors aren't trained to go to business school. They're trained to go to OD school, right? Or be a doctor. Yeah. And so that's something to keep in mind too, of how that all fits into where you currently are. And if you're not the manager, or even if you are, you'll need a manager eventually. Can that manager do that effectively? Can they hold people accountable? Have they demonstrated they can do that in the past in previous jobs? So yeah.
Right. Holding people accountable, very important. So I imagine you would recommend people read Traction, and see if they can implement some of the strategies or fully implement it into their practice. I've heard multiple optometrists say that it has helped them, although it's pretty rigorous and pretty intense, I think, of a process.
Yeah, we hired an external consultant. I think there's a couple of consultants that are eye doctors that do this as well. Yeah, a guy named Larry Golson, who's actually he's a friend of mine. I know he does some of that. And then there's several other folks. And then I'd also recommend reading the book Simple Numbers by Greg Crabtree.
Okay,
it's a very generic version of any business and how to look at numbers. And then I think iDoc, their buying group and consulting group, they actually have good numbers. Usually most of the consulting groups, there's a couple of other ones out there, Acrinos, Aquios, there's a couple of them out there that are pretty good. Right. They all probably have these numbers, right? So if you work, they're fairly, they're usually pretty good too to work with as a starting point. The price point to entry is not as high as some other consultants.
Right.
And so they may be good places to start of baselining where you actually are with your business.
That's good advice. That's great advice. And I would say, I think there's maybe some hesitation amongst colleagues to hire consultants like that. Maybe they think they're too expensive. Mm-hmm. They don't want to feel like they're wasting their money on something, but I imagine it's going to be very valuable to have somebody come in from the outside and evaluate what you're doing and help you streamline.
And I will say this, that there's a lot of consultants are shifting to more of a monthly model, which is like just a per month like subscription, which is a little bit more affordable for folks. So It may be worthwhile to keep them on for a couple of months just to do a quick deep dive in business evaluation, just really figure out where you truly are and help have a business partner to figure out what the next steps are. And, and if anyone reaches out to me, I'd be happy to kind of have that discussion too, as another practice owner, and different perspective. I don't do the consulting side, so I don't, get into that side as much, but be happy to share my experiences with anyone that is interested as well.
Yeah, I mean, you have a wealth of knowledge, having run the practices yourself, and figured out so many of these back end things that you've done. I think there's just so much. Like I said, every time I talk to you, I'm trying to absorb. Right? There's so much that I think most of our colleagues could learn from having a conversation with you. So please do reach out to Ankit. So Ankit, actually, before I do this, I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to our friend. You mentioned iDoc. I got to say big thanks to Dr. Steve Vargo, because I found you through his podcast, I Own a Business podcast. So go check out Steve and everything he's doing. Go buy his books because he's great. So thanks, Steve. But Ankit, where can people find you? Where can people get in touch with you to learn more?
Yeah. Mybcat.com. That's MYBCAT. That's bcat.com. Ankit, ANKIT at mybcat.com. Or if you go to the website and say book a discovery call, you'll get me to the conversation. So you can book straight on my calendar. Be happy to talk. Anything you want to talk about, be happy to talk about it.
Awesome. Yeah. And I could, we haven't met in person, but this is, I think, the third time we're chatting. And I'd say, like I said, you've been really great and open to having the conversation. I've learned a lot from you. So thank you very much. Any final words you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I mean, in the end, I think this industry is a fantastic industry and a business to be in. And I really enjoy it. And it's nice because you're actually doing something that has real impact on people's lives, right? I've worked in other industries where you don't get that. And so I do appreciate that. And and again, very open to connecting with people. So LinkedIn, my website, wherever, just feel free to connect with me. Happy to share anything. If I can share it, I'll be happy to share it.
Sounds great. Awesome. Thank you very much, Ankit. Appreciate the time, man. And thank you to everybody who's listening and watching to the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. Don't forget to share this with your friends. Put it on LinkedIn, send them a text message, take a screenshot, put it on Instagram. And please don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you guys in the next episode.